Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We join you today from Cotton County and the first of several extension wheat field days, and of course the first of many conversations about the potential of Oklahoma's 2018 wheat crop.
Today we have an OSU wheat variety test plot field day, and we had a lot of farmers, a lot of interest here today. We're got a pretty good looking crop, and we're just hoping that we can get to harvest with it. And after a long, hard, dry winter, that we really fought hard for this crop, and I think that we've got some potential to make some good wheat here today. So we were kind of excited about that fact.
There is a replicated performance trial here that was going through, looking at varieties. A lot of varieties to choose from here today, and just a lot of questions about those varieties and what they look like and kind of how they're going to perform this year.
Well, this variety is a Ruby Lee, and it's a very high yielding potential variety, but consequently it has a little more susceptibility to diseases than some of the other varieties. And over the last couple weeks, we've had very little rust show up on any wheat in Oklahoma. We have had some powdery mildew, and lo and behold came down here expecting to see powdery mildew, and there's no powdery mildew, but there is starting to be a buildup of stripe rust, and then also another disease that we don't see that often, Septoria leaf blight. And Ruby Lee is the variety that's showing the most of it. On the flag leaves, it has a severity of around 1 to 10%, so it's not real large right now, but this is a warning that on susceptible varieties, there could be some stripe rust that's really going to start appearing over the next couple weeks, especially if we stay cool and we get some more moisture, which both of those things are in the forecast.
I do know that this plot, or this area right here, not necessarily had a tremendous amount of rain, but I think around 10 inches since it was planted. But it's been more timely rains, and so you can have, you know, if it comes at the right time, you can make it kind of work. But this looks extremely good for today.
The spores that are here that are being produced on these upper leaves, they're very light and powdery, and when you get the winds that Oklahoma tends to get, that'll blow the spores for miles across the state. Those land on new leaves, on infected leaves, and then if you have the wet dews, moisture coming, free moisture on the leaf, and the right temperatures, you'll get the infection, and then new spores will be produced, and it just cycles its way further north. If it's past flowering, there's not any fungicides you can put on. You would just have to let it run its course. If it's before flowering, there's lots of fungicide available that can be used to control it. If you have started flowering and you're in the midst of flowering, then there's really only 3 chemicals that are labeled for that, as far as I know, that you can use. And so you have to be sure and check that label to make sure that you're spraying it and applying it in accordance with the label. I didn't expect to see this much disease down here, and if there was going to be some, I was expecting to see powdery mildew, and it was the complete opposite of what I thought I would see. There's a lot of pluses to having these types of field days. It allows us as the specialists and the county educators to get together and interact with the clientele, with the producers in the state. Actually get out and see disease problems and other agronomic problems in the field and have the specialists there to provide answers and information to the producers and to the county personnel as well. I've always enjoyed it because of that ability and the chance to interact with the people who are actually growing the wheat. But it allows us to get around the state and see what's going on.
Hi, I'm Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. While we've had a lot of heat from fires this April, our air temperatures have been on the cool side. The switch from Tuesday to Wednesday told the story for April this year. We have a warm day, but that's followed by cool days. Tuesday afternoon highs reached the upper 70s and 80s across much of Oklahoma. Wednesday afternoon air temperatures struggled to climb above the 50s at most Mesonet sites. An air temperature graph at Spencer is an example of what we've experienced across much of Oklahoma this April. Air temperatures this year, the blue line, staying below average temperatures, the light green fill. March had some periods with air temperatures above average, but April stayed below average. Soil temperatures have also been on the cool side. As of Wednesday, the 3-day average of 4-inch bare soil temperatures were in the upper 50s for half the state and lower 60s for the other half. Here's Gary with a look at how our recent rains have impacted Oklahoma's droughty conditions.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. Well, we're probably going to end up with one of the coldest Aprils on record, if not the coldest April on record. And unfortunately, we're also going to finish below normal in precipitation. Now, I'm going to show you some April rainfall maps, and you're going to think, well, it looks pretty pitiful. But when you compare it to the last 6 months, it actually looks pretty good, especially to those across western Oklahoma. So let's get right to the maps. Okay, the latest drought map released by the U.S. Drought Monitor on Thursday. It actually still looks pretty bad. We have a little bit inching west of the drought line. But again, this doesn't take into account the rains that we saw later in the week, so maybe we'll get a little bit more improvement next week, but we still have that large area of severe to exceptional drought across the western half of Oklahoma. Now let's look at the April rainfall. Now this is through the 25th, but we do see at least 1 to 2 inches across much of western Oklahoma. And then, of course, we have, as usual, the much nicer amounts over across eastern Oklahoma, east of I-35. Now, we look at that compared to normal, it still doesn't look that good. We still have lots of areas across western Oklahoma that are below normal, especially southwestern Oklahoma, and then up into northeastern Oklahoma. But again, that 1 to 2 inches across much of western Oklahoma is the most rainfall they've seen since October. The Climate Prediction Center has released its seasonal drought outlook. This is for May through July. So by the end of July, they see drought persisting but improving across those areas of the state where it exists now. So maybe not a complete end to drought, but hopefully the spring rainy season, climatologically speaking, will improve that drought to some degree and help some of the impacts. The one drought we do like, of course, is the drought of tornadoes. Now, let's hope that continues and we get some good rains during May. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
There's a lot of air in our conversation today as we talk about puffed foods with Dani Bellmer, a food engineer here at the Food and Ag Product Center. And Dani, let's talk about the kind of process that is used to make these puffed foods and snacks that we all like.
Okay, believe it or not, most puffed foods are actually made using thermodynamics. So we created dough, and we put that dough under high heat and pressure, and then when that dough is exposed to the atmosphere, it sees a sudden drop in pressure, and that pressure change causes the water inside the product to want to flash evaporate. And so typically this is done in an extruder.
Tell me what an extruder is and how it works.
So an extruder is basically a screw auger inside of a heated barrel that the dough is processed through. At the end of that barrel is a die, and the die will be shaped like whatever product you want to make. And again, as the dough exits that die, it puffs, and a rotating knife will cut the puff off, and you have a great product.
So for example, these onion snacks, how would those work in the extruder?
Okay, so as the dough goes through the extruder, the die shape would be an annular shape. So the dough just comes out in this circle, and it's cut off right at the end in a bunch of little circles.
Now, what are the ingredients in the puff snacks, and how do we get the flavors?
So believe it or not, most of them are made with just cornmeal and water to form the dough. And then after they're puffed and cooked, the added flavors come in a tumbler where the flavorings are put in. Those might include cheese, onion powder, garlic powder, lots of salt, but they're all pretty much the same.
And so that's the puff part. How do we get the crunchy part?
Okay, so you can kind of see a difference between the puffiness in the standard cheese puffs and the crunchy puffs. All that we do for the crunchy one is at the end of the extruder, the dough is actually twisted and pulled so that it's elongated in this weird shape. And so there's not nearly as much air in it, and you get a much crunchier product.
That's all there is to it.
That's it.
Very interesting. Well, either way, they taste great. Thanks a lot, Dani.
This week's Cow-Calf Corner could easily be subtitled "What to Do When It Looks Like All Else May Fail." And what I'm referring to is the situation that we have in the western part of Oklahoma, even southwest Kansas, where drought, of course, was the problem that we were working with for several months that caused short hay supplies, short grass situations, and in many cases some pretty thin cows coming through the winter. The option that I think we may want to look at in some of these situations is early weaning of the spring-born calves, where we're actually removing the calf from the cow in a time frame of when the calf is someplace between 45 and 60 days of age. There's been a lot of research done on early weaning here at Oklahoma State University. What they looked at was early weaning calves from 2-year-olds that were really quite thin, and also they followed up the following year and early weaned calves from mature cows that were in some better body condition. Those 2-year-olds that are really pretty thin, coming out of winter, trying to nurse a calf. The research here at Oklahoma State found that removing that calf, weaning it between, like we say, 40 and 60 days of age, really had a positive impact on the reproductive performance of those 2-year-olds as they went through the following breeding season. With 2-year-olds that were in the body condition score of 3 to 4, that's very, very thin. Half the calves were early weaned. The other half, those cows were allowed to raise them to a normal weaning age of about 7 months. Those that weaned the calves early, 97% of them were rebred in the breeding season that followed, as compared to only 59% of the heifers that were still nursing the calves throughout the breeding season actually becoming pregnant. So you see a huge difference. In the case of the mature cows, and quite frankly, they were in a little better body condition, a body condition of a 4 or 5, the impact wasn't quite as great. Those that were allowed to normally nurse the calf throughout the summer period into the fall, they had 81% of those rebred. Not too bad. In the case of the cows that had the calves early weaned, these mature cows, all of them rebred, 100% of them in that particular study. What to do with the calf, of course, is the next problem. If you're going to early wean that calf at, say, 2 months of age, getting it started on a good grain growing ration is going to be key to getting that calf through the summer period to where you again can market it later on, perhaps late summer, early fall, as pretty close to the time that you would have weaned it and sold it anyway. There are some rations that have been developed here at Oklahoma State University that can work with these very, very young calves. It takes a good ration, of course, to grow those calves when they're that young. You'll find them if you'll go to a fact sheet. It's called Management Considerations for Home-Raised Preconditioned Baby Calves. So this spring, or perhaps another spring when the winter hasn't been the way you would want it, and we end up with especially some thin young cows, early weaning may be an option in those very desperate situations. Hope this is helpful to you, and we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Recently, there's been some news in the spring wheat markets, and Kim, let's just dive in. What's going on?
Well, it looks like spring wheat planted acres are going to be higher in both the U.S. and Canada. We've talked about a whole lot about the shortage of protein in the United States and around the world, and that's got protein for your hard spring wheats, which are the high protein wheats. It's got demand for those acreage. Also going on in the markets is, I read one report this week that the managed money is moving from stocks into commodities, and that could be positive for our prices. And you look at what's going on the board right now on the KC wheat contract. That's a hard red winter wheat contract. The market is 35,000 contracts long or bought. And if you look at the soft winter wheat market, the Chicago contract, it's 55,000 contracts short. The market's saying right now that there's more demand for the hard red winter wheat. That's for your bread flour wheat. I think that's where the shortage of quality wheat is, or quality flour is. It's in the bread flour. In the soft wheat, I think it's adequate, and it's telling us we got more than enough soft wheat.
Well, that's all great, but there's a world market out there. How does that play into the Ukraine, to the Russian wheat, to the Oklahoma wheat?
Well, I think the market is reacting to what's going on in the former Soviet Union countries, and I'd throw in Eastern Europe there, because with the additional technology that's impacted our prices, that's impacted our market. Oklahoma's reacted to that. We're down to, what, 4.3 million planted acres, where you go back a few years, we was at 5 million. The market's reacting to that. Also, I think the Oklahoma producers and the hard red winter wheat U.S. producers are reacting, paying more attention to milling quality wheat and paying attention to what the market wants.
Is there going to continue to be a premium for that higher quality premium wheat?
Well, that protein and the quality, I think, is the demand is there. If you look at the basis over the last few years, when the quality has been below average, that basis has been up around -$1. The 18 wheat, the basis was -80, -90. Right now, that basis is down to around a -40, somewhere in that. So it's improved 40 to 50 cents over the last 4 or 5 months.
Now, will the Oklahoma producers actually see that quality premium in there?
Oh yeah, they'll see that, and they've already seen it. That 50-cent increase in the basis is a 50-cent increase in that cash price.
Okay, here we are in April, soon to be May. I love asking you this time of year. What's your projected wheat price for Western Oklahoma, say the middle of June? $4.75. Almost messed up $1 there. I think it's going to be because of that stronger basis, and I think it's because the market needs this wheat. Okay, thank you much. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
With the recent wildfires in the western part of the state, some pond owners are wondering what the impact is of ash washing into their pond. I have not seen this to be a major cause of mortality of fish. It's possible, but not terribly likely. But you might want to keep an eye and see what's happening on your fish populations more closely than usual. This is also an opportunity to consider visiting with your local fire department to see if they have any ideas about how your pond might be better prepared for use as a water source in fighting wildfires. They may need better access, there may be ways to set up dry hydrants, but whatever you do, it needs to be coordinated with your local fire department. Springtime is a great time to be thinking about your ponds. Perhaps you don't spend a lot of time at the pond, and this might be a good way to establish the habit of walking the edges of your pond and looking at the dam and the spillway to see if everything is in good condition or if anything is changing that you might benefit from catching early before a problem develops into a very full-blown and expensive kind of situation. Is your shoreline having any issues with erosion? Do you see any shallowing of the shoreline at any point, any wave erosion going on? On your dam and your spillway, is there any indication of burrowing animals? Now, walking across the dam is the easy way to do it, but if you really want to see what's going on, you need to get down on the face of the dam and walk both faces of the dam to look for signs of burrowing. You can't always see mounds. With muskrat and beaver, they're going to have underwater entrances as they get into their burrowing activity that will be pretty much invisible. So look for any signs of slides or disturbance of the vegetation. And if you see that, you really don't want to let this sort of situation go for several years until you have a very expensive repair issue. The other thing you can be looking for would be plant coverage, aquatic plant life in the pond. We'd like to see, from a fishing point of view, about 20% coverage, 20 to 30% coverage. That's considered good. But if you're seeing a new plant that's coming on fast, or anything that's growing progressively to cover more and more of the pond year after year, try to get after it, get it identified, bring a sample into the county extension office. As you're fishing the pond, if you're fishing your pond, you might try to keep mental notes on what you're seeing. If you see fish that you aren't familiar with, try to get some pictures and get those identified. Make sure that the fish are not becoming overabundant and scrawny, overpopulated fish populations. There are things we can do about that in terms of perhaps adding some additional bass in or doing other things. So take a more proactive approach to pond management. See if you don't enjoy your pond more and find some new uses for it that you hadn't considered.
Finally today, the beginning of the recovery process after devastating wildfires in western Oklahoma. SUNUP's Dave Deacon takes us to Dewey County.
The initial shock has been pretty tough. A lot of these guys that we're going to drive through some of these areas, these guys have lost half to 3/4 of their cow herds, and I know that's pretty tough. And being one of them myself that experienced being hit by the fire and some losses that I've experienced, feel a little bit of their pain, but for the most part though, everybody's pitched in, and now that the initial shock's over.
We're spread out, run 1.5 miles back west, 2 miles back east, then we've got 400 and some acres 2 miles north, and it got all of it. Everything's black. And it's going to be at least 45, 60 days before we can turn back out on these pastures. I lost 40 pairs. This here's what's left off of them. We may have put some more down yet because the feed on them, it's indescribable.
With no standing forage, Roger and his brother have found a way to hold their surviving calves together until the Dewey County pastures return.
South to Cordell, some graze out wheat with this set of cattle, and that's where they're going. Then the trucks will be here this afternoon.
To say that the landscape of Dewey County and western Oklahoma has changed over the past week would be an understatement. But with the fire has come help by the truckload.
Yeah, Oklahoma Standard is a neighbor taking care of a neighbor. And quite frankly, most everybody here in the area that wasn't affected, they're trying to figure out ways to help their neighbors. Rather than just standing by and saying, I'm glad I wasn't affected, they're trying to actually run to it and say, okay, we were okay, you're not, what can we do to be able to help and walk alongside of you?
No, several phone calls, they may see the neighbor in need, they'll call and say, hey, we're going to come and help you. And that's the type of people we're dealing with here, and you see them really band together in times like this. They're in it for the long haul. They're going to be tough.
Much of the early help came from neighbors down the county road, and now help is starting to pour in from hundreds of miles away, from people they've never met. Two ranchers made the 2.5-hour trip from Englewood, Kansas, loaded with hay to drop off at one of Roger's neighbors, because they knew what it was like to lose nearly everything.
I feel like we owe it to the ag community. March 6th last year, the Starbuck hit us head on. We lost about 15,000 acres, lost 155 cows, so we know what these guys are going through. and the first thing that you need is hay to feed your cows.
And knowing that it takes those things for these people to maintain life for the next, whether it's 5-6 months or the next year, to survive, to get into the next calving season, get into the next cropping season. And so if it wasn't for people sending all these donations from all over the state or all over the United States, it'd be really tough for these people to survive. And
I don't know how we'll ever repay them. They've been gracious.
Some say that we're paying it forward, but technically we're paying it back.
As we shot this story on Friday, April 20th, the skies were getting dark. Not because of smoke or blowing ash, actually because rain was moving in from the Texas Panhandle. Since then, you can see much of the area has seen over an inch of rain, which has not only helped raise forage, but also raise spirits. If you would like to donate hay or ag supplies, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
And that'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.